Where did the kind of love for fashion come from?
Part of what I've always tried to do is use my fashion to make a doorway for my faith.
Yep.
And a lot of times people don't understand it, but fashion actually, somebody come up to you, it's the easiest conversation starter. Like, bro, those jeans are fire.
Literally
That's
already
like,
today.
it's like, yo, where do you get that jacket? Is it coming? Da 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 da. And that doorway, because Christ has to be introduced through conversation.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people don't conversate with people. So I try to do things that can start a conversation. And even if I'm looking whack, I'll go up to somebody and be like, bro, your shoes. And I was like, oh, these are things.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I'm saying? But what does that do? That starts a conversation. And who knows where that leads to for the end of it, no matter if it's in that conversation or 10 conversations later, I want it to lead to Christ at some point.
Okay, so he didn't really say anything completely whack in that clip. And this honestly brings up the best case for having nice things as a pastor. Like, oh, it's a conversation starter. Maybe, 10 conversations from now, I'll be able to talk about Christ. Like, that's the best case for it, in my opinion. But here's the thing. This is an example of what I like to call finagling evangelism, meaning that you don't feel comfortable enough to bring up Christ, and so you feel as though you need an excuse. And you try to engineer and manipulate these conversations so that it naturally comes up on its own when you could have just shared about Christ in the first place. Now, here's the thing. I know that is so much easier said than done, especially today. Like, I get it. And I'm terrible at it sometimes, I promise you. But I want us to get out of this way of thinking, to think that we need to have a justification or a good reason to share Christ. We do have a good reason to share Christ. It's because Christ is life. Christ is the living water. He's healing. He's family. He's salvation. He's the only straight path. The only way that we can interact and relate to a loving Father. We don't need a reason not to deprive people of that. So don't feel like you have to ever justify bringing Christ up. Don't feel like you have to put yourself in a certain position or engineer the perfect conversation. Just share Christ. Share him with a smile. Tell people where you met him and how. Just be real. Be genuine about it. Don't do it out of obligation. Do it because he's good and you love him. And you love the person you're sitting across, and you wouldn't dare deprive them of him because you care about them. Don't justify bringing up Christ to nobody. If somebody wants to feel uncomfortable or get on to you for that, that's on them. You share your good news. That's kind of an aside. Sorry, I had to preach for a second, even though I ain't a preacher. Here's the thing. I have no problem with people having nice things. What I can tell you is, if I was a millionaire megachurch pastor, I would feel uncomfortable doing that. And I get it. Some people are called to rich people. Rich people need Jesus, just like poor people do. I just think there's something so beautiful about the humility of a godly man that's willing to just come as he is, without the fancy accessories or clothes or the car, in order to be approachable to the highest number of people possible. Because most people are not dressing with 10 out of 10 fashion because they can't afford it. Most people are not driving supercars. Most people are not living in 20,000 square foot homes. And I don't really have anything against pastors that do that. I just greatly admire the pastors that can do that and choose to give instead, but choose to be frugal and save for their future generations instead, rather than living lavishly. I have such a high degree of respect for those men. So can pastors live lavish lifestyles and buy all the fancy things and be all the fancy places? Yeah, absolutely. But does that pose the greatest possible benefit to the greatest number of people? I don't think so. And I think the men that choose to do that when they could live lavishly deserve a high, high degree of respect.